All right, what's up, video game designers? Thanks for following along, all of those who followed along last week. I want to encourage you to check out the other video that will be posted on this channel for the solutions to the problems that we talked about last week. I also want to remind you that with the new school cancellation for the rest of the year, that doesn't mean that school is actually canceled. We're going to be doing these classes remotely, so it's really important that you continue to follow along with these videos, and because these tasks are going to turn into assigned and graded work pretty soon, I suspect. So make sure you continue to follow along. If you are not a member of the Remind group, send me an email and I will get you the link for that. I may also end up setting up a Google Classroom here shortly, so look for that link in your emails or in Remind. So this week we are going to be going over some concepts for 3D level design, not just how to do it, which we've talked about before with Pro Builder and Blender and stuff like that, the terrain tool. But we're going to be thinking about sort of the theory of designing levels, specifically in this case for a deathmatch style game. So with this, we're going to look at some examples that that already exist, because it's the easiest way for us to sort of wrap our minds around the intentionality of the design of these things. So what we see here, this is a map from Call of Duty, and this is a really good example of the sort of thing that I want us to be looking for here. There's a lot of intentional design that goes into this that I think is really important for us to be able to look at and recognize as we are trying to move into designing in this 3D space. The first thing that I want us to recognize here is the distance in between spawns. So we see right here on the key it has S for spawn point. We see that a spawn point is over here on the far left side, and basically as far away as you possibly can have the opposing team's spawn point. So this is obviously intentional, right? You don't want to have them spawn right in the middle, otherwise the outer reaches of the map will never be reached. So you want to make sure that you have enough distance between the spawns that that they're not immediately running into each other as they respawn. Continuing out from the spawn points, I want us to think about the move patterns that we expect the player to have. So thinking about this spawn point right here, the player really only has a couple of decision points when they start out. They can't really go back. They can't go to the side over here. They can either choose to go through the barn, or they can go north around this side of the barn. On this spawn point, we see that they have the option of going around the work shed, going through the work shed over to here, or they have the option of going down here. Now, this is really intentional. So we want to, when we're designing our levels like this, we want to always be thinking about how we're controlling the move patterns of the player. So you know, if the player chooses to go down this way, then they come to another decision tree. Do I want to go back here? Probably not. Do I want to go through the center of the map here, or do I want to go around this building to the south? So always trying to make sure that we're not giving the player too many decision trees on their you know, which direction they're supposed to go, because ultimately the goal of this map is to force people to eventually come to each other and have this sort of bloodbath, right? So we're trying to control their number of decisions so that we're going to force those interactions. Coming up here in the barn, if they continue going through the barn, they are going to come through to this funnel point where they can go either up at a diagonal or to the left here. If they had come around this way, they can either go down around the building this way, or they can continue going north. We see each of these corners, we come to a decision point where there's only, you know, 2 or 3 different options. You know, if you're on this corner, you can either go into the greenhouse, or you can go through this little gap over here. All of those points gets us to another point that I want to bring up, which is strategic obstruction. So if we're, you know, if this work shed weren't here, then this empty space would feel like, well, I'm just spawning out, and I only have one decision to run sort of this way. You know, you could go through here or down here, but you could sort of delay that decision until you get to this point. This wall is no mistake, right? We're having a strategic obstruction so that we are not able to actually view beyond here until we get down around this corner. These obstructions here also, we see all these little white squares that says unplayable area, right? So these are all intentional obstructions, which is getting me to another point, which is sight lines. So if these obstructions didn't exist, this one here, this one here, this one here, then we could see that if I was standing right at the corner here, I would be able to see all the way through, you know, I could even like see all the way through back over here. We don't want to be able to do that. They've had strategic obstructions, so these trees, these not navigable areas, so that we force the player to move around in such a way that they're only able to see for a limited distance. We see that this is the case. There are really limited areas where we can see for a long stretch of time. And if we are able to do that, then we're actually exposing ourselves in a lot of different areas. So, you know, thinking about like, well, I could see a long ways if I'm standing out here, like I could see a long ways this way, but you're wide out in the open. So it's really intentional. They're the obstructions that they put in here. All of these boxes, everything is to try to break those sight lines so that you can't just, you know, snipe someone from one spawn to the other. We always want to be thinking about the length of vision that we'll have, because if you do that, then it, you know, we've all played a level like this where there are either too many obstructions, so certain guns are not viable. So you know, if we imagine that every corner had 3 different obstructions, then the only thing that would make sense is to go in with like a SMG or a shotgun. If all these obstructions were gone, then everybody would be running around with a sniper rifle, because you would never be able to get to the other side of the map to get in range of any of the other weapons. So these obstructions are really, really important, and they're what makes your map go from you know, this snipe fest to an actual like strategic sort of thing. I want to look at another map here that's a little bit more complex. This is Overgrown. Here again, thinking about our distance between spawns. So we have 2 spawns on the opposite corners here. Controlling the move patterns. So from the spawn, they can either go left or up. From here, they can either go into the building, down across the bridge, or around the building here. So again, just limiting the number of moves that they can make at any particular juncture. And then we see here that there are a lot of intentional obstructions. So this one also has a lot more elevation change. So we can see, you know, this barn, for example, there's a ladder right here, which we can see from the key has an X. You can go up the ladder to the top floor here, and this gives you additional sight lines. So if you're standing, we see that there's a window here and a window here. So now this barn has vision, and the upstairs here has vision down across the bridge. So you have to have these obstructions down here so that you can potentially drop down in elevation and sneak around here to the barn without getting shot by the person in the top of the barn. These strategic obstructions, it's very, very intentional. So sight lines on this one, we see that there's a little bit more gap between these areas than in the other map. So this farmhouse we see has an upstairs, which is designated by this arrow that's pointing out over here. We see that these are up, so we have a ladder or a stairs that goes up to this upstairs here. And so this has pretty long sight lines. If we think about it, it has vision basically over this entire area. And so you have to have some sort of downside to that. There's a couple of things here. First, there's 2 entry points to the upstairs here. There's a ladder over here as well as these stairs. So having 2 entry points so that they can't just like protect themselves from the back, as well as having additional windows. You know, when you're out there, you're really exposed. So we talked about that a little bit on the other map. There's a lot of different sight lines into those windows because you're elevated. So that's one potential downside to that. You know, putting that building in the middle is another sightline issue that they've considered. We look at the rest of this map. This is a pretty long sightline, but you expect that people are going to be peeking around this corner. People are going to be peeking around this corner, looking for people from the opposing team. That's expected. People are going to be protecting themselves, peeking from here across the bridge to the spawn point. But we also see the strategic obstruction that is stopping anybody from sitting over here and just sniping people as they spawn. So it's very, very intentional. The sight lines is very intentional. The strategic obstructions, they did a really, really good job with both of these maps. And what I want you to do is to design a map sort of along this vein. I want you to design a map, a 3D level that is designed for a 5v5 FPS game, sort of like a team deathmatch. So I want your level to have at least one designated spawn point for each team. The maps that I showed you just had one designated spawn point for each team. That's totally fine. If you want to have multiple spawn points, you can do that as well. I want you to focus on map design. So these things that I talked about: elevation change, sight lines, distance between spawns, move patterns, strategic obstruction, all those things that were intentional that I talked about on the maps that I gave the examples. And I want you to have a key for ease of reading. The key that I showed you that has the S for spawns and arrows for up, X for ladders, that works great. If you want to come up with your own key, that's totally fine as well. And your map can be in any of these forms. So it can be a digital map. You can, if you have a drawing program that you like to use, you can draw it on there as long as it's clean and has a key. It can be an analog drawing if you want to, so pen and paper. For each of these, if it's analog, take a picture of it, send it to me. If it's digital, then send me the file, just email it to me. Or you can create an actual 3D environment in Unity. So you can use Pro Builder to sort of gray box out your level if you want to. Or you can use Terrain plus Pro Builder to do like the maps that we saw, where you can have buildings on top of terrain, which is pretty neat. Or you can design it all in Blender if you want to. I don't really care, however you want to do it, whatever your preferred method is. And obviously dependent on the technology that you have at home. So if you don't have a computer at home, then analog drawing works great. Just draw it out, make sure that it's clean, take a picture of it, send it to me, and I will take a look at that, and we'll go over potentially some of the solutions that people gave next week. Okay, so that's the end of this video. Go ahead and submit your maps to me. Send me an email link to your GitHub, or send me a copy of your map and I'll take a look at it, give you some feedback. So really quick, quarantine beard update. We see I'm coming in pretty thick on the neck beard here. Getting clearly, I was designed to be able to grow a goatee more than a full beard here, but it's coming in all right, and we'll keep track of that. If you have any questions, then shoot me an email at matthew.edelman@ksd.org, and I look forward to seeing everything that you guys submit to me. I'll see you next week.